Okay, all right. So um, I will direct everybody to uh, the slide deck that I prepared here. As I mentioned, we are the Pacific Northwest Rural Broadband Alliance. On this call is for the Lake County Internet Co-op. Um, so who are we and what do we do? We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization that's dedicated to building mesh network broadband services for rural, underserved, and unconnected areas. We build entirely community-owned and operated broadband networks, which we'll explain a little more what that means as the call goes on. Our networks are entirely locally maintained by community members. Um, our organization are entirely staffed by local community members, and our networks are particularly unique in that they are capable of reaching rural areas and areas that most traditional ISPs can't reach. We build networks that are maintained entirely net neutral. All of our customer connections are entirely private, secured and encrypted. Um, and we work to close the digital divide. As everyone in Montana is well aware, we are 50th in broadband access, which means that the vast majority of Montanans can't easily access broadband networks. Nationally, more than a third of our population doesn't have access to real broadband as it's defined by the FCC, which is, as you see here, more than the population of California and Texas combined. 25% of rural America doesn't have access to proper broadband. And this isn't just an economic issue. Even families that make over $75,000 a year don't have access to proper broadband. So this is a problem that we all face. And that's what our organization is really here to address with the style of networks that we build. So what our service looks like is it's a fixed wireless service, which means that it's an antenna that's attached to the side of your house. And so as you see here, there's sort of several different styles of antennas that may be mounted to the side of your house. And the style of network that we build is what's known as a mesh network. So it's constructed by residences that host relays. So each customer has the option to host a relay, which in effect is simply just an additional antenna that allows the signal to connect to the next home over and build in a peer-to-peer sort of style and grow the network one neighborhood at a time and one community at a time. With these wireless mesh networks, we're able to cover a very large geographic area, and we're able to reach really very hard to reach areas that typically would be very difficult to reach with wired services like cable broadband or DSL. What our relays look like is they take a various different sort of shapes and forms. In some instances, they may look a little more similar to like a cell tower, like you see in the center picture, that we may deploy on businesses or very dense areas where there are lots of customers to be connected. In some more rural areas, we may deploy a relay that's more like on the picture on the left, where it requires a mast on the side of a home to get as much height as possible so that we can broadcast a signal as far as possible. But in general, we try and keep each of these relays really as inconspicuous as possible. So this picture on the right, as you see, is really what most of our relays look like. So on each person's home, they'll have a receiving antenna that the internet that connects their home to the internet. And then there'll be a transceiving antenna that goes to connect their neighbor's home or a home that's further off in the distance. So our proposed service area for Lake County Internet Co-op will really cover pretty much the entirety of Lake County. We're looking to potentially start the network in Polson, and we'll reach all the way down to Ravalli and Arlee. We'll hopefully start a point of presence at both end of Lake County and build both south and north at the same time. What's particularly advantageous in this situation and the style of network that we build with these point-to-point wireless relays is that Lake County is particularly flat, and we have line of sight in virtually every single direction. So that allows us to build out these networks very quickly, very efficiently, and cover all of Lake County as efficiently as possible. This equipment is very inexpensive and really very high performance. So we're really able to deliver at bare minimum 100 megabit per second internet speeds, all the way up to 500 megabit per second internet speeds. And each customer that participates in the network and hosts one of these relays receives a real-time revenue for the amount of bandwidth that they help serve to the customers and the homes around them, which I'll let Jacob talk about here a little more in a moment. So for people that are interested in our service, we've set up a pre-registration site that people can go to. That's althea.net/Lake County. We also have an email address that people can contact us at any time with any sort of questions. And we have obviously presence up on Facebook and Twitter. We work to keep everybody updated as to the progress that we're making on this network. So we launched the pre-registration campaign several months ago. We've got about 51 pre-registrations so far. It takes about a minimum of 100 pre-registrations for us to really start planning the network. But our hope is to have this network in a point where we can launch it in Q3 or Q4 of this year. So with that, I will turn things over to Jacob to describe how our network functions in a little more detail.
Hello, everybody. So typically with our network, the more relay operators we have, really the better. It creates more redundancy. So maybe if a home has a power outage or something, it allows the network to route around that certain customer, or maybe you're moving your router or something like that. I mean, we do request you try and keep it up as much as possible, but the more relays really, that helps the network be more resilient and prevents issues going forward. So kind of onto the hardware, you saw some photos there. It consists of two antennas, a receiving and a transmitting. The larger antennas are typically for longer links. Some of those that you saw on there, those are our 5 gigahertz and 60 gigahertz consumer range, ultra high bandwidth. But we just deployed one of those in Missoula a few weeks ago, and that's for ranges up to 2 miles or so. So really long range, especially if we have pockets where people haven't pre-registered or things like that. That allows us to connect customers quicker without having to rely on pockets where maybe people are waiting to see how the network is going to work and things like that. But we can always come back and connect them later. So typically that's how our network works. 2 network cables, one on the receiving, one on the transmitting. We hook that up to a custom firmware router, which it will look similar to your typical home router. So you'll no longer, if you have cable like Spectrum or something like that, you won't have that modem anymore. You'll just have a router with two or 3 potential network cables out of it, depending on how many relays you opt to host. One of the really good things about being a relay operator is there is a small cost to the additional hardware, but you are compensated by the people down the line for use of your relay.
Jacob, also you might want to cover that somebody asked about the cost of the service and kind of what that looks like in general.
Yeah, so typically we aim to keep our costs for the service, and ultimately, this depends how deep you are in the network. but we try and, keep you in that $40 to $60 range a month, to keep it low for everybody.
And also there is an upfront cost for the hardware. So in certain circumstances, depending on where the customer might be, we might be able to go with, we try and keep the hardware options as cheap as possible. But there is that upfront cost. So I mean the connection packages range anywhere from $250. That includes the outdoor antenna, the router, and the installation cost. Some of the higher end packages, if you want a higher performance router, it's going to deliver you better speeds. If you want, or if your home requires an antenna to reach a relay that's particularly farther away, the cost might be more in the $350 to $400 range. To host a relay, those costs typically start at the $500 range. But again, the advantageous part of hosting a relay is that you get a real-time revenue for hosting that relay. So as you deliver bandwidth to surrounding customers, you receive a revenue that serves to subsidize your service cost. And in some cases can even produce a small profit if you're connecting a particularly large amount of customers around you. But in general, the notion of hosting a relay is to make the network more resilient, to deliver the connection around to the neighbors around you, and to subsidize your own service cost.
Really great questions in the chat, Elvis, if you wanted to address a few of those.
Yeah. So how it compares with Spectrum? So I mean, we outperform Spectrum service here in Missoula, and with Lake County Internet Co-op, we'll be able to deliver the exact same quality services. So we offer symmetric lines. So that's 100 megabits both up and download speeds, up to 500 megabits up and download speeds. So Spectrum doesn't offer anywhere close to symmetric speeds. Their network isn't really engineered to be able to deliver those quality of connections. But ours is, which is a really big advantage. Let's see here. So the question that the router and the relay provides a VPN service. Yes, that's the case. So and something that also sets us apart as an ISP. So most typical ISPs, they don't provide you any sort of encrypted connection. So really anyone from the government to any sort of malicious third party can potentially see your traffic and eavesdrop on your connection. That's something that just simply can't happen on our network, because everyone's connection by default right at that router is provided with a secure connection that's encrypted entirely across our network. As for the billing, does work a little different than as you would expect most ISPs to work, right? So most ISPs will sell you a service tier speed plan, right, where they'll give you a 60 megabit down, 2 megabit up, or all these sort of different service tier plans. Whereas with us, all customers receive the fastest bandwidth that we can possibly deliver to them, and instead it's billed based upon on usage. So it's really more of a sort of utilitizing the internet, much in the same way that you'd pay your electric bill or anything like that. As Jacob mentioned, we work to keep the price as the price per gig as cheap as possible, so that we keep people inside that $40 to $60 range. We monitor basically what the average customer on our network and both and also what the average broadband customer uses nationally. And we use those figures to arrive at what a fair price per gig is going to be to ensure that our customers stay in that range. Now, some customers that use less bandwidth, they may end up with an even cheaper price. So for example, in Missoula, some of our customers that are, maybe a bit older, they don't use the internet quite as much. Maybe they do some online courses, maybe do a little bit of streaming, but they're not doing really heavy internet tasks. They're paying as little as $20, $25 a month. Some larger families that may have, 4, teenagers that are constantly online, parents that work from home, people that are doing really, really heavy internet tasks, they might pay, upwards of $80 to $90, maybe 100 on the high end. But still, a very, very fair price, certainly competitive prices compared to Spectrum or CenturyLink, and at a higher speed and higher quality of bandwidth. And particularly, in this case, that it's, entirely community owned and operated. So this is a situation where you really get to own the internet, and have sort of say in terms of how the network performs and how it grows. And so you're not just sort of left at the bay of a few small, or a few number of corporate ISPs. And I think actually with that, we'll go ahead and hand it off to Kevin to talk kind of a little more about the community nature of the network.
Absolutely. Elvis. I'm just going to keep this really quick. A lot of folks, they don't realize that the internet's not owned by Xfinity or HughesNet or any incumbent provider. We can own our own internet. But to do this, we have to organize as a cooperative. And by definition, we have to cooperate. This really does put the community into the driver's seat. Relay operators, word of mouth, is a way to pay it forward. And Kaylee will touch on a little bit of this coming up. But I just wanted to reiterate that really, we ultimately are a reflection of our communities. And the more we work together, the stronger we become. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Kaylee.
Thanks, Kevin. Let me share my screen here. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Kaylee Thornley and I am the Cooperative Development Center Director at Mission West Community Development Partners. And I did see a question in the chat asking if Mission West was involved, and yes, we are. After COVID hit, I had heard about this internet co-op forming down in Missoula, and just at Mission West, we were realizing, how much we were becoming dependent on the internet, especially with COVID and people trying to do school from home and work from home. So I got in touch with the Pacific Northwest Broadband Alliance to see if we could try to start a internet co-op up here. And so this is kind of the outcome of a few months of planning now, and trying to get the word out there. So Elvis and Jacob kind of talked about the technology behind this, and I'm going to talk about the structure and the organization and what it really looks like to build and own an ISP together. So just to start with the basics, what is an internet co-op, or what is a cooperative? So it's a business that is owned and operated for the benefit of the people who use its products or services. So in this case, it would be the internet service. And really, you can think about a co-op as being two parts. There's the Democratic Member Association, where people share a common economic, social, or cultural need. In this case, we have lacking broadband out here. And then the other part of it, and this is what distinguishes a cooperative from, a nonprofit or a club, is that they operate a business to meet that shared need. And that business is owned by the members of the cooperative. So continuing on, co-ops are owned and they exist for the benefit of their members. So they're owned by the people who participate in the business, and those member owners have an obligation to utilize the services of the cooperative and also participate in its governance. So it's member controlled, and that means it's democratically governed by its members. And we'll kind of get into more later on about what that actually looks like. And then the other aspect of it is that there's member benefit. So that means that both the services that the co-op is providing are high quality. But at the end of the year, if there's a profit, which in cooperatives is called the surplus, it's returned to the members on the basis of patronage. And in the case of the Lake County Internet Cooperative, that would likely be in the most relevant in terms of the relay. If you host a relay, you get a little bit of a return on that potentially. So I just want to touch on that co-ops really work everywhere. You know, they work in rural areas, they work in urban places. They can be found in every single sector of our economy, from finance to agriculture, to, you know, Ocean Spray and Ace Hardware. A lot of people don't know those are cooperatives. And most of rural America gets its electricity from electric co-ops. Or many people might have been to the Ronan or Polson Farmers Market, which are both co-ops. About a third of Americans are members of a cooperative. And so it is a unique model, but it's more common than people think. So drop it in the chat if you're a member of a co-op yourself. And all cooperatives are operated on the basis of these shared cooperative principles. And I won't go into too much of these, but I think a lot of these are reflected in the internet co-op model. It's more than just about making profit for the company. It is about a concern for community and making sure everybody gets their voice heard. And in this case, you know, get some control over their internet service. So let's get into the specifics of the Lake County Internet Co-op and the ownership structure. So like I said, it will be owned by the people that use the internet service. And members will own an actual equity share in the company, which is called common stock. And this gives you the right to vote on what happens in the co-op. But in this case, you'll also own a piece of physical equipment that allows you to receive and potentially relay the internet signal. So that's kind of a neat dual ownership structure in this case. And then I also wanted to talk about probably the future relationship with the Pacific Northwest Rural Broadband Alliance, Elvis and Kevin and Jacob's organization. That will likely look like a contract in the future, and that's kind of up to the board of directors to determine in the future, but it will be for some technical service and access to key infrastructure, and also the potential to connect with future networks like the Missoula Valley Internet Network. So I just want to say that the Pacific Northwest Rural Broadband Alliance wouldn't be the owner, it would be the co-op that would be the owner of the network. So going on to governance, like all co-ops, it will be democratically governed by its member users. And each year, co-ops hold an annual meeting where they elect a board of directors, and that board of directors is empowered to make decisions on behalf of the cooperative. And sometimes members will vote directly on important decisions like changing the bylaws, but mostly it's up to the board of directors to make those key decisions throughout the year on behalf of the membership. And the board of directors doesn't really manage the day-to-day operations. They're responsible for hiring staff or making contracts with service providers to do those installations, to operate the network on a day-to-day basis. But one of the things I really love about co-ops is that, you know, because you're a member, you have the opportunity to run for the board of directors and really have a say in how the company operates. And that's just not something that you're going to see with a company like Spectrum. So it's really about taking matters into our own hands and making the things that we want to see in our community. So we've kind of talked about the what and the why of cooperatives, but let's get into how a co-op is actually formed. So all co-ops are formed by a dedicated group of individuals who are willing to put in that time and energy to form the co-op. You know, they see a problem and they want to fix it. And this group of people is typically called the steering committee. And there's usually a group of technical assistance providers, so Mission West and the Pacific Northwest Broadband Alliance, that help the formation, but they can't really form the co-op. It cannot be formed without the participation from the community, from members, from people showing up and getting the work done. And that's just key to it being successful. So let's go into a chart of kind of how that process of formation looks. You start with a shared need and a group of people who have an idea. And this is the steering committee. So their job is to ask, will this idea work and how will it work? So there's kind of two tracks to the development process. On one hand, you have the business development. You have to ask, is this feasible? And then once we get into the business plan, you're saying, this is exactly how it is, how it will work. Eventually leading to incorporation of the cooperative. On the other hand, there's also the Democratic Association building, which includes co-op education, talking to your neighbors, recruiting them to become members, letting them know about, oh, we have this great new co-op that can provide internet service at an affordable price, and fundraising for startup costs. Eventually all leading into a member equity drive, recruiting new members. And once there's a sizable number of members, the co-op will hold its first meeting and elect the board of directors, which will hopefully get the co-op off the ground. And just a lot of times the steering committee ends up becoming the board of directors because of the membership sees their knowledge and their experience forming the co-op and sees the value in that. So all of this has been leading to say that we're working on recruiting members for the Lake County Internet Co-op. And if there's anybody in the audience today, the group today, that would be interested in joining the steering committee, we would absolutely love to have you. You'll be working with Mission West and Elvis and Kevin and Jacob on forming the cooperative. It's a good opportunity to give back to the community. It can be fun meeting new people, and you really get the opportunity to shape the future of the co-op. So I just want to emphasize that there's no particular set of skills that's required for joining. Really what's important is a passion for the work and wanting to form the cooperative. But you know, if you're a tech person, if you have experience with business or legal experience or past co-ops, that would all be valuable experience. And then the other piece is really having the time to meet on a regular basis to help get it started, to talk to your neighbors, and to work on how the co-op will work. So we're going to drop a link in, Will's going to drop a link in the chat for anyone that might be interested in seeing about participating on the steering committee. We'll be reaching out to everybody. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Does anyone have questions? See some in the chat.
Questions in chat? Maybe there's some questions. I think I actually saw a few questions go by that I might not have addressed. I believe Missy asked if the service will qualify for Lifeline Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. That is something we've definitely been looking at in terms of the Missoula Valley Internet Co-op. I definitely, believe by all means it should. I don't know what the application process of that looks like. We have been researching that. There's no reason why our service wouldn't. In fact, really, ours is a sort of ideal application of that program. One thing that was kind of noted once that the FCC started that program was that immediately, companies, large telecoms immediately looked at how they could sort of take advantage of that fund while not really benefiting people. Like, for example, only offering it to people that wanted to upgrade services, or not allowing that fund to be used to pay back any debt that person might owe, or anything like that. Whereas with our service, what's particularly unique about that is that not only would that fund go directly to low-income families that really do genuinely need help with paying their broadband service, but those service fees get distributed to relay operators, and in that form, really, that service fee gets distributed directly back to the taxpayers that actually fund that service. And that's really what makes our model particularly unique is that it's a multi-stakeholder network that is made up entirely of community members. That, you know, as you own the infrastructure of the internet, you actually do get you know, paid for your participation in that. And the more people participate, the stronger the network becomes, the faster the network becomes, and the cheaper the network becomes. So that's definitely you know, a big advantage of this style of network that has been getting a really great reception here in Missoula. And for people that may want to kind of research more about the technology platform that we use, it's called Althea. There are a lot of Althea networks that are being deployed across the United States, and in fact being deployed across the world. There are some Althea networks in Africa, where, I mean, obviously they don't have millions of dollars to spend on internet infrastructure. They've been able to build some really great networks there for you know, obviously very low income areas, and get people very fast and resilient internet. There are some networks in South America as well that they've been deploying. So this is a model that works really everywhere, and puts the power directly in the community's hands to solve you know, a problem that everyone's facing. And obviously here in Montana, there is no area that can't use some improvement in broadband access. So that's really why we're here, to help solve that problem. You know, and work with Mission West to help sort of be the catalyst to help form this cooperative. And so we're hoping it will definitely be successful. Oh, and about in terms of government funds, so we are also Pacific Northwest Rural Broadband Alliance. We are on the META Broadband Committee that is advising the state on broadband policy, broadband legislation. Obviously, Montana was recently awarded $320 million of the CARES Act for broadband development. So those are definitely, that's grant funding that we are absolutely eligible for. There's also a $200 million state loan fund that's being developed. That'll be won't be, you know, grant funding, it'll be loan funding for broadband development. But again, just more towards that pool of for broadband development. And what's really I think really reassuring is that at the state level, they understand this $320 million, this $200 million here is not going to be the singular thing that solves broadband for Montana, but merely a down payment. So this is funding that will be a huge, you know, a huge benefit to everyone statewide. But there'll be more funding coming, and so there's, you know, we can rely on the fact that there will be plenty of grant funding from the federal level, from the state level, to build these broadband networks.
And then, yeah, just to add to that, I do think the American Rescue Plan, there probably are funds that will be able to be used for this, as well as the infrastructure bill. So we're just watching as that kind of rolls out. There might be some ways to get creative. I just saw that libraries are going to get some money for digital inclusion equipment. It's possible that might be an avenue for getting low income families set up with this equipment. And then also outside of COVID funding, the EDA has some funds available for rural broadband infrastructure. So that might be an option, as well as private foundations. But one of the things that, you know, I thought, oh, okay, internet, it's going to cost a lot to get this started. But really the startup costs, because you don't have to start off with like a giant tower right away. It's sort of like you build the network as you go. It's really not a huge startup cost, which was really helpful to us in a place like Lake County. So that's one good thing.
Right. Yeah, and exactly to that point, that's really the advantage of the Althea model, right? So I mean, in Missoula, you know, it only really cost us about, you know, $10,000-$15,000 to really just get things off the ground, right? And then from there on, you know, it's sort of a many hands make light work thing. You know, that people that, you know, can host relays, and everyone sort of purchased a little piece of that infrastructure along the way to grow the network. That allows, community equity that already exists inside the economy to really fund this network. And so a combination, of equity that each individual community member is able to put into this network to help it grow, and combined with grant funding, with loan funding, that really allows for the network to be built out very, very cheaply, very efficiently. And that's really the big advantage compared to centralized networks like Spectrum or any sort of incumbent ISPs that really leave smaller communities sort of out in the cold because they don't fit into their profit model. With this model, it really allows for a very small number of customers to just to make the network sustainable, and then anything beyond that, the network becomes profitable, and grows certainly at a linear, if not exponential rate. Lifeline program. I'm not familiar with Lifeline program. Kaylee, are you familiar with that?
Unfortunately, I'm not.
I just want to interject really quickly. All of these sort of different opportunities that you guys are coming up with are tremendous. It's also an example of the community in the driver's seat. Bring these things to us. We'll see what qualifies. We'll see what we can leverage and move forward to help improve things, subsidize cost, and so on and so forth. So that really is a great example of just a way that you can participate and really advance the network forward. So I really love those questions. Thanks, guys.
Does anyone have any questions around sort of the construction of the network or what the service looks like that we may not have answered, or any sort of clarification on that?
I did see a question about any testimonials from current users. And I thought you might be able to talk about people's experience so far in Missoula.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we do have community calls. So we've recorded our past community calls in Missoula that are available on our YouTube channel. We'll also put this call up on our YouTube channel. With each one of those community calls, we try and get another one of our customers on that has a sort of different perspective. And the reception has been really, really great. Everyone sort of uses the internet in a different way, right? And everyone has sort of different different expectations, different needs. And what's really particularly unique about our services is that it's not, we don't have just sort of a take it or leave it model. Like here's what we got, either take it or leave it. With our service, we really work to approach every single person on their needs and expectations, and work with them to ensure that those are met, right? And whether that be on price, whether that be on how the equipment's installed, whether that be on tailoring the service to meet their needs. We work with every single customer on a case-by-case basis. So people have had really an incredible reception, from certainly one of our first customers, Ian Carlson, was on one of our calls. He's a software developer. He's now able to do his work from home faster than he's able to do it from his office, right? So he's able to be more productive with his home connection than he's able to at his office. So that's a huge boost right there. Another one of our customers that spoke on one of our previous calls, she attested to the fact that she's receiving the same or better speeds than she was from Spectrum, but we cut her internet bill by 75%. Right. So that's huge right there, right? She's receiving just as good or better service, but paying only $20-$25 a month versus the $100 that she was paying to Spectrum. So every single person has something that they gain from our service, and the fact that we do work with every single customer on a case-by-case basis, ensures that we can always, tailor everything to everyone's individual needs. The trigger for Lake County at 100. Yeah, so there is that that the point where we are trying to reach 100 pre-registrations, and that's really what allows us to really begin planning where the network is. So the value of the pre-registrations, it's not a commitment to say like I will absolutely 100% be a customer. It's merely for us to gauge where the demand is, and when we can start to gauge really where the biggest cluster of customers are, that allows us to start looking into particular locations for where the gateway for the network will be, where we'll need to source a fast fiber line from a wholesale provider that will actually feed bandwidth to the network. As I mentioned, we're hoping to likely start in Polson, and hopefully our Lee as well. We have been in contact with many telecom carriers in the area that we could potentially source these fast connections from. So we do have a lot of options, but we do need those pre-registrations to be able to tell where we're going to start and where we're going to really focus our attentions. Let's see here. We can absolutely share the slides that we used during the presentation. Absolutely.
I just wanted to add that that's a really big role that people who are already signed up can play, is telling people about this, getting the word out there so that we can get to that 100 faster. And if you really want to be a part of it, join the steering committee and we'll do some more focused outreach as well. So yeah, exciting.
And we are really excited in terms of our organization, working with this potential co-op that will hopefully be formed. We plan to really be that organization that drives this network to success. So, each of us, me, Jacob, Kevin, we have years of experience in network engineering, software engineering, veterans of the telecom industry, where we've built national telecom networks, and so we've worked at a very large scale. We really know a lot about what it takes to build a successful network. With this Althea platform that we found is incredibly revolutionary and a really rethinking of how ISPs operate. And because it really puts that power in the community's hands, we're able to do things that traditional ISPs just have never been able to do before. And particularly in reaching areas that other ISPs can't reach, and making a sustainable, profitable network in areas that other ISPs just would never be able to ROI from. So they'd never invest in building a network there. And also because of the cheap and efficient way in which we build our network, that also means that it's very easy to evolve and upgrade to meet the rapidly growing need for bandwidth, right? Because a lot of areas, they may get an ISP that brings in service and it's great for now, and then 2-3 years down the road, they're in the exact same position that they were before they had that fast new ISP. With our network, it's always able to upgrade very easily just by swapping out antennas at either end, and all of a sudden you have that faster service, or adding another relay, and that's really kind of all it takes to build. So timetable for Ronan in the middle of the area. So those timetables will be a little fluid. So I'd love to be able to give fast and firm dates. I expect that this network will launch in sort of late Q3, early Q4 of this year. At least that's kind of when we're hoping to. So that'll also kind of depend on how long it takes to form the co-op, and how long it takes to reach those pre-registrations. But certainly we'll certainly hopefully have the network launched well before the end of the year. And if we receive the needed customers and the needed participants in relays, we could potentially reach Ronan, within a few months of launching the network, but it kind of depends on a lot of factors, so we can't necessarily promise anything. There are flyers to be handed out. Yes, flyers to be handed out to neighbors. We do have some brochures and promotional materials. We can make those available to everybody. We'll put, in fact, we do have some links to those promotional materials on our website, nwbroadbandalliance.org. You can also learn a little more about the technology and how our networks function. You can see some of the other areas that we're looking to deploy networks to. We are looking to be a regional provider of rural broadband. So we have networks slated to launch on Anderson Island in Washington. Obviously, this Lake County network, Missoula is our flagship network, but we're not going anywhere, and we're situated to grow as fast as we possibly can to reach these areas that need broadband, because like I said, there's no shortage of areas that need help. All right, any other questions? Okay, all right, well, so
It looks like we got one really good
we
question.
are
That just,
go ahead. Is there a question? Oh, Kalispell Flathead area. Right. So yeah, one thing about this Lake County network is that once we have a foothold in Polson and in Lake County in general, that'll be a really great launching off point for us to cover the rest of the Flathead area. So we definitely will be looking to build out service, certainly all along Flathead Lake. Ultimately, we have to sort of assess, the areas that need our service the most, and that's kind of where we look to focus our resources. But definitely, the more these communities participate, and everyone sort of gets on board, and signs up to be relays and has desire and interest in the service, the faster these networks can grow, and the sooner that we can reach all these various areas. So we hope to definitely hit all the areas in Montana and in the Northwest in general that really need internet. So yeah, like I said, we have a presence on all social media platforms. We're on Reddit, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. We highly encourage people to ask questions, to email us, to call us. We're always available to answer any sort of questions, to talk to customers, to talk to people that are interested in the network, and really answer anything that anybody's wondering. We'll obviously be working very closely with Kaylee and her organization, hopefully getting this co-op up and running. We really hope that the steering committee gets moving, and that we can work out launching this network sooner than later, because we know that people need this service. But definitely, one thing we always want to say is, Rome wasn't built in a day. So everybody's usually is very excited and wants service right away, and as much as we want to give everyone service right away, it will take a little bit of time. So we appreciate people's patience, but we definitely appreciate people's interest, and the more people that participate, the more people that we can attract, the faster we can serve everybody, and the better service we can provide for everybody.
I just put my email and phone number in the chat for anyone that has questions about the co-op side of things. Maybe contact Elvis or Kevin if you want to know about the technology. But yeah, And if you want flyers, happy to print them out for folks. But I just want to thank everyone, and I'll be in touch with the people who signed up for the steering committee. And feel free to share that link if you have a neighbor who couldn't make it, or someone who might be a really great member. Happy to have whoever is interested join that group. So.
And we will be hosting more of these community calls in the future as we make progress, as we have more things to inform the community about. So this will be the first of many community calls to come.
And we'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to hop on and listen to us. It was about an hour, so definitely appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.